Hello and welcome. My name's Lanita. I'm the Scrappy Grandma, and I just finished recording my Bible reading for the week. And I wasn't able to do it last week, and I wasn't able to do an update last week, and so I'm catching up for the last 2 weeks. I wasn't able to do an update or my Torah portions last week because um, when I went to wake my dad up last Sunday, which was when I normally do my recordings, there was something odd going on, and he wasn't waking up, and his room was all disheveled, and he had tore his clothes off, and he was mumbling gibberish. And I called an advice nurse, and then they said take him to the hospital. So we called the ambulance. They came and got him. When I got down to the hospital, um, he was stripped naked and trying to get out of his hospital bed, and he can't walk. He is wheelchair bound, and but he wasn't in his right mind, and he had to go to the bathroom, and he was trying to do that. He actually had a chair pulled over kind of like he would with his wheelchair. So I think he was trying to, get into his wheelchair to be able to go to the bathroom, but and then when I tried to go and help him get back into bed and let him know, hey, Dad, this you can't get out because you're going to fall and hurt yourself. He actually started hitting me and screaming at me, and so then I went and called the nurse. I went and yelled out at the nurse's station, which thankfully was right outside his door. And it's like he's trying to get out of bed, he's going to hurt himself, and he's being violent and hitting me. And they all came running, and sadly had to restrain him. And at this point, we had no idea what was going on, and it was terrifying. Um, and I think I'm actually going to be able to make it through this recording without crying. That's my goal because I think I've just cried my tears out and there's none left. Because I've done a lot of crying over the last 3 weeks with having this man come live with us. And I'll explain that comment in this. So, um, he had to be restrained, and he was out of his mind. Um, he was screaming at people and hitting people, and he was what appeared to me writhing in pain. Um, my dad has, as he came here, I got his medication list. And over the past 3 weeks, I've learned that what everybody knew to be problems with him, nobody even had scratched the surface on a lot of it. There's a lot more physically wrong with him than anybody knew, because he doesn't remember his medical history. And he lived in California. And then in July, he moved to North Carolina. Within 2 months of living in North Carolina, he had several falls, and he ended up in a skilled nursing facility in North Carolina. And he moved there with his sister and her daughter, my cousin, his niece. They, basically tried to piece everything together and had been taking him to different doctors, and it's been a mess, and it's been a scary puzzle to put everything together. But anyway, so um, my father is on a um, strict regiment of Norco every 8 hours. And when we have, like, one day, I forgot to put out his middle of the night Norco, which, we have an alarm set at 1 a.m. and he wakes up and he takes it and he goes back to sleep. And that way, when he wakes up the next morning, he's ahead of the pain and not. And there's been a couple of times when we got off schedule and he is in screaming, excruciating pain in the mornings if he's missed his midnight dose or 1 a.m. dose. Um, Screaming to go to the hospital. He can't stand the pain. And I have to give him his pain medicine and, just, give it 15 minutes to a half hour and it should start working. And he learned that did happen. We'd give it to him and he'd relax. And sure enough, within 15 minutes to a half hour, the pain would be tolerable again. It would be back down to a level 2 instead of a 10 plus. So, The learning curve has been bizarre and long and hard. So anyway, I had given him his morning medication. That's how it all kind of started. He wasn't waking up, and it's like, "Yeah, it's Sunday. Let him sleep in. We slept in, He must have had a hard night. His sleep schedule was off and weird, and he'd stay up watching TV at night, and then he would sleep during the day, and it was. And I had talked to him about that week about we need to get you on a schedule to where you get up at the same time every day, and you do your physical therapy exercises, and you eat your meals, and yada yada yada. Um, so he wasn't waking up, and so I'm like, okay, I told Rusty, I'm like, okay, at 9:30, I'm going in to give him his meds so he can stay on his schedule and not be in pain. And, he was just kind of groggy and he took the medication and then just went back to sleep. And I'm like, okay, like I said, must have stayed up late and he's sleepy and wants to nap. Then by 11, I'm like, okay, something's really wrong here. And so I went in and started trying to rouse him. And that's when, and he had, he had taken his pain meds at 9:30 and it's 11. They should be working wonderfully. They had been for the past 3 weeks that he's been here. It had worked. But he was like, pain bad, pain bad, pain bad. And I'm like, okay, so where's your pain, Dad? And he's like, in my fells, in my bubula. I'm like, what are those? And can you show me? No, no, pain bad, pain bad. And so that's when, I called the advice nurse, went down, went to the hospital. And so it's so tragic, He's having to be restrained because he's tearing everything off of him. And all I can figure is he's in so much pain. And I've been in this kind of pain before where anything touching you, I mean, even a feather touching your body is excruciating. And that's how it appeared to me. He was like, he just wanted everything off of him, including his clothes and every tube and ugh, everything, monitor, everything he wanted off of him. And, he kept trying to, he's restrained, so he's having to lay on his back, but his comfort position is kind of on his right side, kind of in a fetal position to where he can rub his right leg is where he has pain. And it's nerve pain from compressed discs, pressing on nerves in his leg. And that's what also makes him unable to walk. So he couldn't get in that position. But he tried, man, and he was tenacious. He would get in that position. He would figure a way to wiggle and squiggle, and as soon as he got enough room, man, he was ripping things off. So nobody knew what was going on. Nobody. And so because it seemed neurological, they started doing brain scans. They hooked up the EEG on his brain and come to find out he was having seizures, a continuous seizure or multiple seizures. And I'd almost believe that a lot of what he's been going through over the past few months when he started falling back in North Carolina, um, because as he would describe it, even before that, when we went in July to pack him up for him to move in with his sister in North Carolina, he would say that he would have episodes where he would start to have tremors and then he would collapse. They thought that it was a medication he was taking to suppress his hormones because he's was being treated for prostate cancer, and it's a metastatic cancer, so he has to have hormone suppression because the cancer feeds on it. Um, so they took him off that medicine, but he was still falling. He was falling when he came here, and he would get real shaky. And so chances are he's been having these underlying, so having to become a detective and working with my cousin back in North Carolina, who we've decided we've become very close. We've never met one another because you can go back to my other recordings. I didn't meet my father until I was 38 years old and don't know any of my, his side of the family. Um, But anyway, we've become extremely close in tag teaming, taking care of him, getting him from North Carolina out here to California. And we're actually, her and I are planning prayerfully that we can set aside some time and meet up with one another. She's on one side. In fact, it's really interesting. I sent a package and it showed the map. She's almost directly straight across the United States. It's a trip. But we want to meet somewhere in the middle and have a girls' spa weekend, just the two of us, and get to know one another and spend time together. But anyway, so, a couple of days are going on, and he, she contacts me and she's like, I was just talking to my mom, which is his sister, and he was on anti-seizure medicine about 30 years ago. So he had, in 1983 or 1984, was hit by a car and he suffered severe brain damage. Actually had a chunk of his frontal lobe removed. Um, and in this, actually before this, before we found out about that he was on anti-seizure medicine back then, um, the attending physician in the emergency room, this was like day two, he did an MRI. They literally had to completely sedate him to be able to do any of the testing because he was just constantly moving, tugging, pulling, and he wouldn't hold still. So they sedated him, got the MRI, and the doctor was showing me his brain scan and basically told me that make end of life plans. He wasn't coming back. And ooh, my camera's doing something bizarre. Anyway, um, and then I actually the next day I had a doctor from his home health who does palliative care. He had gone in and looked at the records and he basically told me, your dad's not coming back, barring a miracle. And he says, I believe in miracles. I know they exist. I've seen them happen. And there's a possibility we can have a miracle, but without a miracle, your dad is not coming back. He's this make end of life. Um, so I had two doctors telling me to make end of life plans. And then his neurologist, Dr. Dmitry Bachenko, who's awesome. Love that doctor. He was like, no, no. That's when they found out about the seizures. He's like, no, if we get him on the right seizure medication, um, he could live the rest of his life on seizure medication and get them stopped and under control. Well, then we find out that he actually was on seizure medication because he was having seizures after being hit by a car back in 1984. And he chose to take himself off of the medication. And his excuse or reason for that is because every time he took the medication, it made him depressed because it reminded him of the accident he had gotten into. So seizure medication is supposed to be for life. If you have seizures, you take seizure medication for life. And here we are, 1984, 94. I can't even do the math. 40 years later, they started happening again. And like I said, we're not sure how long he actually has been having them undetected. Um, so I mean, we've seen signs like, that's probably what was going on when he would, be in, come out and be completely with it, go take a nap and come out completely confused. It was, so we believe he was having the seizures. So they started giving him the seizure medication and sadly, and they had him hooked up to the EEG, still had him restrained and everything. There was even one when he got moved up to his room in ICU. I told the nighttime nurse, it's like, look, it's one, we were told that he couldn't have any comfort medication. So he couldn't have any pain medication. And I tried explaining to them, like, he has been without his pain medication for 3 days now. He is in pain. I can tell by the way he keeps going to rub his leg. And when I massage his leg, and Rusty and I, we would massage his leg, rub his leg for him, he would lay back and, ah, we knew he was in pain, but they wouldn't listen to us. And they were telling us that the neurologist didn't want him on pain meds because he wanted a clear brain scan. Okay. But it was like, we're 3 days into this now, and his pain has not been treated. And I'm like, this has now become inhumane. And the doctor had actually ordered Ativan, which is an anti-anxiety, because they were seeing him as being agitated. I was seeing him being agitated because of pain, because I experienced that kind of pain. You know, we believe the pain was, or the agitation and the delusions were delusion or pain-induced delusion along with the seizures. Anyway, so I told the nurse, you know, this is inhumane. The doctor's ordered Ativan, and he hasn't, and it's every 4 hours as needed. You need to give him some medication so he can get some rest finally. He has been in this agitated delirium state for 3 days. You've got to let his body rest. And she assured us when we left at 9:30 that night that she would give him a dose of Ativan so that he could at least get 4 hours of rest for his body. And I warned her also, because she's his first nurse up in the new, up in his new room, you've got to retie his restraints every couple hours because he's wily, man. He figures out how to get loose, and he will tear everything off of him. Rusty and I went home. We've been coming home at night so that we can get a good night's rest. Plus, they didn't have anywhere for us to stay in ICU in his room, or in the emergency room, except for chairs. And so the next morning we go in, and his IV's in a different place. His all the leads for his EEG, it's not working. And of course, it's now the day nurse. And I'm like, when was he given his Ativan last night? And she checked. He was never given Ativan last night. So he's still writhing in pain, still agitated, still in this state, never given any Ativan. And he had ripped out his IV. He had ripped out his catheter. He had ripped out the leads to his EEG because his hands got loose, and he was able to scoot down enough to where he could rip, everything off of him like I warned her he would. So I fired that nurse. I was like, if I can't, I can't allow her to take care of him if she's not going to take care of him. And bless the day. And she was such a sweetheart, Kristen. My gosh, the best nurse, the best nurse. Um, Within 5 minutes of me getting there and saying, this is inhumane, this has to stop, she gave him the Ativan, and he finally got some rest. So then Dr. Bachenko, the neurologist, comes in to check on him and see how this anti-seizure medication is working with his seizures, with the brain waves. Well, no, hours and hours and hours and hours later, they came back in and reconnected everything in his, to his head. And Dr. Bachenko came in before that was reconnected, and we had a long conversation. And I'm like, they're saying that you won't allow him to have pain medication. And I, can tell you, well, they're like, we can't give him pain medication because he can't modulate himself telling us he's in pain. And I'm like, I am his advocate, and I'm telling you he's in pain. So I talked to the doctor, and I'm like, they're saying that you won't allow him to have pain medication, that you want him to have Ativan, which is anti-anxiety, does nothing for pain. And he's like, no, I would prefer him to be on pain medication and not the Ativan, because the Ativan actually affects the EEG, whereas pain medication won't. And so I'm like, well, then make it happen. Go talk to his doctor and get some pain medication ordered for this man, because this is now day 4, and this is inhumane. Just because he can't verbally tell you because he's in so much pain and having these seizures, you need to take care of this. He ordered morphine, and it takes forever for these things to actually transpire. they were finally able to give him morphine later that day. And for the first time, well, no, they gave it to him that night after we were gone. That's right. And that is when these doctors are telling me make end of life preparation. He's not coming back, all this stuff. We go in the next day, the next morning, and I go up to Kristen, the nurse, his nurse, and she's like, he's better. And I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, he knows his name. He knows where he's at. He's having conversations with people. And it was all because he was able to get out of pain. And they had been also ramping up his seizure medication. And we walked in and he was talking to people, and throughout the day he was even cracking jokes. He wanted a T-bone steak. He was hungry. He hadn't eaten in 4 days. And he was back. We got our miracle. So then it starts to turn ugly again. So my dad and I have never had a relationship. Um, I found him at 30 when I was 38, and we, connected. I visited with him and his wife at the time, Lisa, and you know, we tried to start having, fostering a relationship, and we did for a couple of years, and then he and Lisa ended up getting divorced, and after that, he put no effort into being in contact with me. I would call him once or twice a year. And if we were ever down in the Southern California area, I would, let him know that we're in the area. Would you like to get together and have dinner or breakfast or lunch, whatever, it was at the time we were there. And we'd get together. And he was just never nice to me. He would make derogatory, insulting comments about my weight, my lack of education, and all these things. So it was hard to get close to him. And then, fast forward, um, he wants, he's moving to North Carolina to move in with his sister, and he needs help to, pack up his belongings and clean his townhome and send him on his way to go live with his sister, which they planned out. They're both elderly. They're going to, live out the rest of their days together. And so in July, we went down, we packed everything up, had the shippers ship it to North Carolina for him, and, tried to have a relationship. I tried to be tolerant of, this man's 84 years old. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. This is his nature. He's just not really, really very nice. Um, then now fast forward here, he moves in and he's extremely, hold on a second. Hey, Russ. Uh, yeah. All right. Sadly, I went to try to pause it, and instead of pausing it, I ended it. So it's going to be two videos, which I hopefully can splice together. Anyway, so um, get back to where I was. So the past 3 weeks, he's been here. I've been taking him to doctor's appointments and, you know, caring for him. He's wheelchair bound. And it's almost like he has a contempt for me. It's really bizarre. And I don't know if it's spiritual. He doesn't believe in God, doesn't he said he tried religion once and it didn't stick. His mother put him in a Catholic boarding school when he was young, him and his brother, and just so he doesn't have any good, of any good opinions of God. And so he's got actually when we told him that, God brought him back to us and gave us a miracle, he scoffed at us. Um, and so it's interesting because, he just makes, he's negative all the time, constantly complaining and making negative comments. I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm cold. I don't like this. This tastes terrible. I won't eat this. I mean, it's just constant, and it it, it it's it wears on me. When and I've been trying to take my thoughts captive and not allow his negativity. But then, along with his negativity of just about general things, then he also is extremely insulting of me. He insults me on a regular basis. Um, and so, and I've had conversations with him. And even in the hospital a couple of days ago, um, he actually became so insulting that I basically told him, and it's all about him eating. He won't eat, and I try to explain to him, you've got stage 3 kidney disease, diabetes. You're in a hospital. You need to regain your strength. You need to build your body up. You need to nourish your body, or you're never going to get out of this hospital. And he was extremely insulting to me. And I finally like, fine, starve, stay in the hospital. I can't care anymore. I can't care more about this than you do. You don't want to live. I can't fight you anymore on it. And I left. And my husband had some very choice words for him about, you will not treat, you will not talk to my wife like that ever again. And if you do, you can live in a hospital. We'll find a place for you to live that won't be with us, because you're not going to disrespect my wife in our home. So the Father's been showing me a lot of things. On top of that, got other personal stuff, devastating. Like I said, I've cried so much in the past week. Um, got lots of, here it comes. Lots of devastating personal stuff, life changing, altering things happening, um, going on. And what the Father's showing me, um, let them. I can't care more about their salvation, their comfort, their eating, their, let them. Just let them. Let them be what they want to be, and let them make or break and live with the consequences of the choices they're making. And I have to, because constant nagging and criticism and insults just wore me out. And I reacted in the flesh. I definitely reacted in the flesh. And what I'm dealing with is very painful to my heart. And so I tried to protect my heart. I like just want to go lock it up in a vault and not allow people to damage it. And through processing this with the Father over the past couple of days, I can't. He is my shield and my defender. He is my protector. I can't shield and protect my heart. Only He can. And so, and it's hard to detach yourself from people who you love more than anything. But when they become dangerous and unsafe, you have to detach emotionally, mentally from them, but still trust the Father. And I'm still in a situation where I'm having to serve them, sacrificially serve them, and trusting Him to protect me. And it's a process. I can't protect myself because I'm going to do it in my human strength, and that won't work. But He is my shield and my defender. He is my safe place. He is my protection. And so I can stand back and just let them be and do whatever they're going to do, even if it leads to their own destruction and the destruction of my relationships with them. Let them. Let them go. Release them. lay it out on the altar. I mean, we are, what does it say? We can't love mother, brother, son, daughter, anything, more than him. And we can't cling to these. The Father always tells me, hold on loosely. Don't let go. Just like the old 70s song, hold on loosely, but don't let go. And so I'm having to lay these relationships on the altar. They will shake out however they're going to shake out. You have to be a willing vessel in order to walk the narrow path. And if you're not a willing vessel, you get left behind. And I have to, I can't be Lot's wife. I can't be looking back, hoping for something that it appears will never happen or is not, at least not happening currently. And so I've had to just lay it out, leave these relationships up to him, and still walk the narrow path, focus on him and his ways, and let them do whatever they're going to do, even if it destroys everything. He will protect me. It will not destroy me. So, and it's interesting how all of these always, how the Torah portions, the weekly readings, as I told my friend the other day, I'm tired of living the Torah portion out in real life. I'm tired and it hurts too much. Poor me at that point in time. Um, and because every week the Torah portion becomes a reality in my world. And so where Joseph, Joseph he was betrayed by his brothers. He was, you know, sold into slavery. He endured that. We don't have much, of how he endured it. Did he endure it well the whole time, or did he have times like me? I mean, that's my whole thing is like, I'm not enduring well right now. Um, I'm sure he probably had times where he wasn't enduring well. And then like last week's portion where he's in prison and the cupbearer, you know, forgets for 2 years that he promised that he would tell Pharaoh about Joseph. And he you know, then finally when Pharaoh has the dream, the cupbearer's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I was supposed to tell you about this guy that can interpret dreams." So Joseph had to have had times of hopelessness, like, "Oh man, I thought this was my ticket out. I was going to get out of prison, but he forgot me." And then 2 years later, so we're called to endure, and we're going to have times where we're not going to endure well because we're human. But as long as we can stay focused on him and his direction and his path for us, we can he can teach us how to endure well through the pain, through the pain. Um, you know, Joseph was in a position when his brothers, this portion, when his brothers, come to him for more grain and they still don't recognize him. And, he even tests them again. He tests them when he favors Benjamin. Are you going to be jealous of this brother as well, like you were with, Joseph? Or have you learned your lesson in the last 13 years of me being gone? And, and they proved that they had, you know, they proved that they had learned, um, and they were repentant from what they had done to Joseph. And then everything was brought back around full circle, where he was able to love them and redeem them and save them from the famine that was over the land. So, what a wild ride it is. So, there's my update for this week. I have no idea what's going to transpire this next week. I can't even imagine. My dad's supposed to be moving into a skilled nursing facility for a period of time for him to regain, his, you know, regain some sense of self, and you know hopefully they can get him back to the baseline where he was when he was before he went into the hospital, before the seizures, where he can transfer from his wheelchair to his bed, wheelchair to the toilet, wheelchair to the car. Was able to dress himself at that time. So my prayer is that he'll be able to be brought back to that place with physical therapy and occupational therapy. And now with the seizure medication, hopefully he'll become more steady. But he definitely has a uphill battle and a long road because his muscles have atrophied horribly over the past couple of weeks. So um, he was just starting to get set up with in-home health physical therapy. And when the physical therapist at the hospital asked me, would you prefer him to come home or would you prefer him to go into a home, into a skilled nursing facility? And I'm like, I want to do what's best for him. And she says, well, in skilled nursing, he's going to get therapy every day. Up there with home health, he's only going to get therapy once a week. And I'm like, okay, then go ahead and put him in a skilled nursing facility so that, his chances of rehabbing are greater than coming home and, having longer periods in between therapy. So I covet your prayers. They probably are moving him tomorrow if we can find a place for him. Pray that it's local and that it's not, they're saying he could be in a home as far as 2 hours away from us. I pray that it's local and that we're able to, and that he's able to, keep some of the appointments that we have scheduled. His one appointment that he's been looking forward to the most is his spine doctor because he wants to walk again. And, he's been impatient because, originally they said they couldn't see him until March. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. And so they were able to finally, it was originally January 23rd, and then they moved it up to January 13th. So we've only got a couple weeks now, and he'll probably still be in the skilled nursing facility, but I'm praying that he'll be able to make that appointment so that we can assess. Some doctors are saying he's never going to regain and walk again. There's no procedure that can help him, but we have to exhaust all resources to see if that's actually the truth. And prayerfully, maybe he will be able to walk again. So I covet your prayers. I thank you for all of you that have been walking beside me through the, walking beside me in the fiery furnace that I have been in over the past couple weeks, and especially this past week has been the most, one of the most painful, devastating weeks of my life. I uh, liken it to the period of time that our adult children and grandchildren were estranged from us for a couple of years. That was the most devastating time of my life, and this is right up there with it. So, those of you that have been walking with me and holding me up and encouraging me and praying with me and letting me process, thank you. And for those of you that don't have the resources and don't have the support system, let me encourage you to get involved with our women's Torah group, our women's Bible study group, that has now become a discipleship group, because these women who are truth seekers and completely sold out and committed to walking the way of the Messiah, our Messiah, um, they've been my lifeline. They have continuously led me back to truth. And yes, this is happening, but yeah, he has everything handled, and he will continue to blow our minds in showing off with his love for us and his provision and his care. So if you want information on getting involved in this women's group, it's online, so you can live wherever you live and connect with us. And it is the most beautiful, most Christ-like assembly of people, women, that I've ever experienced. I've never been one to, I've had girlfriends here and there. I trust, as much as I'm able. And the Father has provided a group of women that truly seek Him, truly walk in His ways, and love and minister and care for each other. It's such a beautiful gift that I've never experienced or seen anywhere else. So if you need support and love and learning how to walk in His ways and study His word, let me know. I'll get you connected with the group. All right. Now I got to figure out how to splice these two videos together and get them uploaded onto YouTube. Thank you for all your prayers for being there. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you've got any insight or questions or anything like that, and be blessed. And prayerfully, I'll be back to update again more next Sunday. Bye for now. Now I got to figure out how to, there we go, end.